Welcome back to In the Loop, folks. We've all heard the saying, history repeats itself, right? For many across Europe, the question of whether history will repeat itself in a destructive way is top of mind right now. At one point in time, the Soviet Union, with Russia at its center, was an equal rival to the US as a global superpower. At its peak, it dominated Eastern Europe and encompassed 15 distinct republics. That union collapsed in 1991, something Russian President Vladimir Putin previously called a catastrophe. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, we've seen multiple attempts from Russia to reoccupy some territories that were a part of that union of nations. Crimea in Ukraine is just one of those instances. There was also the Russo-Georgian War in 2008, which resulted in Russian-occupied territories in Georgia.
I think everybody now has realized that there is this instinct to expansion, this imperialist old trend of Russia that is not going anywhere unless it is confronted by determination.
Russian neighbors like Georgia and Moldova, who are neither part of NATO nor the European Union, are thought to be the most vulnerable to Russian expansion. That's why, together with Ukraine, these two nations are now applying for EU membership, a complicated process that can take years and is far from guaranteed. Now, even for former USSR countries inside the EU and NATO, the war in Ukraine brings renewed fear of Russian aggression. Newsy correspondent Ben Shamiso keys in on the small Baltic nations in northeastern Europe.
For countries neighboring Russia, the war in Ukraine feels alarmingly close. Tens of millions wondering, are we next?
Nobody can feel safe now. Maybe it will be Poland. Maybe it will be Baltic states.
Among the most concerned, the small Baltic nations of Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia, a region squeezed between Russia and Belarus with a long and painful history of Russian occupation.
You know, you hear stories of people who packed a go bag in case they need to leave.
European security expert KRISTA VIKSNINS is a dual citizen of Latvia and the US. She lives in DC but has many worried friends and relatives in Latvia.
People are starting to talk to relatives or friends in other countries.
Like Ukraine, the Baltics were once part of the Soviet Union and are home to a sizable Russian ethnic minority. Russian President Vladimir Putin's pretext for invading Ukraine was protecting ethnic Russians there. But unlike Ukraine, the three Baltic nations have been part of the EU and the defensive NATO alliance since 2004. That means the US and other allies will come to their defense if Russia were to invade.
We want to make sure that Russia knows that an attack on Lithuania or any other NATO Article 5 country comes with a cost.
This year, the US and NATO bolstered military capabilities in the Baltics and other eastern flank countries. But experts tell Newsy that may not be enough.
Even though Russia didn't show its best potential in Ukraine, the Baltic armed forces are far weaker than the Ukrainian ones.
In a string of op-eds in English-language newspapers, Baltic leaders are calling for a permanent NATO presence and the placement of air defense systems. Currently, NATO troops rotate in and out of Eastern Europe to avoid provoking Russia.
Rotating through means that, there's transit time, etc. We need people that are there on the ground, that know the region, that have made the connections.
Defense analysts are particularly concerned about the Suwalki Gap, a 60-mile strip of land between the heavily militarized Russian enclave of Kaliningrad and Belarus.
If by chance Russia was able to seal that off, they will effectively seal off the Baltics from the rest of Europe.
The Baltic nations have been extremely supportive of Ukraine because they recognize that Ukrainians are fighting for the Baltics too, and for the entire European continent. More than Brussels, Berlin or Washington, they know one fundamental thing: Putin can't think he's won this war. Ben Shamiso, Newsy.